My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big.
You're tuned in to Faith City Outreach with Marina Maria, the founder of Global Gospel Worship Radio. Maria interviews local Christian pastors, authors, musicians, and global leaders, sharing their testimonies and the servant work being done for the Lord. In Matthew 6:33, Jesus reminds us to seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. We hope this program will encourage you to do just that. Now here's your host, Marina Maria.
Welcome to Faith City Outreach. This is Marina Maria with today's special guest, Stirling John, who is an Ojibwa inspirational country artist from Saugeen First Nation in Ontario, now based in Alberta. His music blends heartfelt country storytelling with messages of hope, resilience, and reconciliation. Stirling's artistry and advocacy have earned him recognition across Canada, including a 2024 JUNO nomination and multiple honors from the Western Canadian Music Awards and others. Thank you so much, Stirling, for joining Faith City Outreach and sharing about your latest song, Even If, as well as your inspiring journey of using music as a bridge for healing, empowerment, and the celebration of culture.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Stirling, thank you again for joining us on Faith City Outreach, and you're very welcome. For those who are meeting you for the first time, can you tell us about your roots in Saugeen First Nation? And then you can share your Jesus story.
Sure. Yeah, my family lives on Saugeen First Nation in Ontario, Canada. So it's about an hour away from Toronto. And I went through, so my father ended up moving back to the reserve. And I remember going there time to time. My mother raised me and my two brothers just off the reserve. And so we certainly had a great connection to the land there, the area, and family out there. But it certainly posed its fair share of struggles for sure.
And then can you share your Jesus story?
Yeah, so we ended up having great mentorship in our life. We grew up in a small town called Ontario, and my mother really valued faith and also ensuring that we had good upbringing in our lives, me and my brothers. So we went to Wingham Baptist Church, and my first time I ever performed was at the church when I was 5 years of age, and ended up going up on stage, How Great Thou Art. And we had great guidance in our life. Pastor Smith was certainly one of those mentors that really helped shape our lives and have some good guardrails in our life. And I came to know the Lord as my Savior when I was a young child, actually. So we grew up in that church, went to the school in that church, and we moved there to Barrie, Ontario when I would have been 12 years of age. We went to Heritage Baptist Church in Barrie, Ontario, and went to the Christian school there for a number of years. But yeah, no, I certainly had faith at a young age, and very fortunate for that. And it certainly served well through the years, because when I was 14, I went to Oklahoma City for a youth trip with our church. And I remember giving my life to be a missionary when we went down on that trip, but I didn't fully know what that meant at that time in my life. Sometimes you're under that emotion. You know that God has that plan for you in your life, but traditionally people think missionaries are people that go to, the jungle, overseas to these different places that are hard to reach. And it's kind of what I thought was meant for me, but I had this other path ahead, and it led me down. It's certainly God's path for my life. It led me into working with frontline policing and communities across Alberta, across Canada, and it's really helped bring me back to my Indigenous culture and community as well, working on First Nations reserves as a police officer out here in Alberta, and now how we can bridge between policing, communities, and also share my faith and uplift and mentor our youth that are really struggling with proper mentorship in their life. So it's a full circle moment for sure.
How did growing up in an Ojibwa community shape both the person and the artist you've become?
Yeah, so what's interesting about that is I've actually grown up more on First Nations communities here in Alberta, which is actually the Cree and the Blackfoot communities. And but Indigenous culture and community is very much the same. It's very community oriented, family oriented, being there for one another. It also has many struggles too. And the dark side of those struggles is that there is a past history in Canada with, the residential schools that goes back years where people were actually taken from their families and put into residential schools. And there's certainly a lot of struggles now in 2026 that have come from that. So I certainly wear an interesting job as a musician, a police officer, and also as an Indigenous person, because, as a police officer, I wear the history of Canada, which is not necessarily a good one. But as an Indigenous person and a police officer representing the force, I'm also in a great position to mentor our youth. And when we talk about shaping the person I've become, I've gone through my own hard times. And 2017 was certainly one of those times for me. And reverting back to faith and music certainly was healing for me. But I find that trust is one of the biggest things that is most important with building relationship with Indigenous communities, and it takes years. Music has been one of those things for me that has helped build trust between the community, policing, and also my music career. So, yeah, it's been an interesting ride for sure.
I know your latest song is called Even If. What do you hope people take away after hearing your latest song?
So we all have different struggles in our life. This song was actually written by my bandmate Dave Peterson, and we were performing at my reserve in Ontario of 24. And there was a family that was there in a wheelchair, and this person was never going to get better. It's a lifelong struggle, a medical issue that they were dealing with. And the family that was there caring for that person is really what the song was about. And it talks about, I'm going to stay, I'm going to care. I'll do what it takes so I'm always there. And really, this really speaks about God's love in our lives, right? God is always with us, even though sometimes we feel that we may be alone, we're not. And we want people to be uplifted by this song. It can be a number of different things that it applies to, whether maybe it's a family member that's struggling with medical issues, maybe it's mental health, right? We are called to be there. We're called to bless others and lead by example. And this song is meant to be an inspiration for those that are struggling and care with those that are, and just to really inspire.
When I was listening to that song, it did remind me of God's unconditional love for us. And so you have that, the voice of taking us there, that emotion, as you're singing that song, that emotion just at least it reminded me of God's unconditional love for us. So thank you so much for singing that song. I wanted to ask you another question about the Indigenous communities in Canada. How can Canadians from all backgrounds play a positive role in building stronger relationships with Indigenous communities?
Yeah, so this really goes back to my conversation. Trust. Trust is something that takes a long time to build. Right, we're making strides there, but we have to have sincerity as a community to really want to understand what happened within Canada and how we're going to get there together. Because some people are like, well, we're doing treaty land acknowledgements, we're declaring that. We hear it all the time in music events, any ceremony that opens up. We declare that this is on Treaty 6, 7, 8 territory, ancestral lands, etc. But does that become more of just something that people say and don't necessarily take to heart? And I think, and I've even heard this from elders within the communities, the Indigenous communities, is some people would actually prefer not even be spoken about if people don't mean it. And we have to really take heart in what the history is in Canada and not just make it about something that is just something we have to say and then we move on to the sports, move on to the music performance. I think that researching the history and actually truly understanding and finding ways to liaise with Indigenous communities, to invite Indigenous youth for if they have an event in their community, whether it's in your city, and making opportunities available for Indigenous youth to have a voice and get out there on a stage. And quite honestly, I am not convinced that we're fully there yet in Canada. I can speak for events that are big, that happen every year, that are on Treaty 678 territory, that don't necessarily make true meaningful opportunities for Indigenous youth to get on main stage performances, to really further what they're doing within the arts. So we have a lot of work to do on that, but it all starts with us, right? It all starts with what we're doing with the music and truly spreading God's love, right? And being where we're supposed to be at.
Amen. I've talked to other Native American leaders, and they've also mentioned basically almost the same thing. And they're from a lot of them are from here in Arizona. And so it appears to me that it's just a global issue, that it really comes down to a heart issue, your heart.
The interesting thing is, I've certainly had opportunities to present awards and get on stages and present other artists to stage. And I've become more of a voice within the music industry up here in Alberta, and I find that some of the associations, when it comes to music associations, etc., they provide opportunities, quote, for Indigenous people. But I find that sometimes we're getting less than opportunities than the other non-Indigenous. And I understand how politics works in government. And I think that a lot of times when people get the opportunity to go up on stage and issue an award to somebody else, it's a checkbox for that association to say, hey, we've supported Indigenous people. This is where we get our funding. And I think that we need to do a lot better on that, because the cycle continues. So it really does start with us, but also these associations have a big part to play in this. And we're talking big associations that are still playing the game, unfortunately.
Yes, and that is something that I really appreciate you working in that, I guess, arena, and you being a voice and you working with the youth and being witnessing to them about Jesus. Not only just witnessing to them about Jesus, but as they surrender their lives to the Lord, they become the voice that God has given them and fulfill the purpose and plan that God has given them. So thank you so much for being out there as a missionary in your own land.
Yeah.
Through your travels and performances across the country, what encouraging signs of healing, hope, and faith in God have you witnessed recently, Stirling?
Well, I have a very interesting hat to wear when it comes to this. And, this is a very loaded question, because I'm not just talking about the arts. I'm talking about policing, my own personal experience working within communities. I see things through a very different lens than most people see. And I can tell you, like for instance, just yesterday, I was dealing with an individual who was going to jump off a bridge, and we ended up preventing that from happening. And I'm put in positions where people are at the rock bottom of their life. And sometimes the seeds that we sow, we don't necessarily see the growth right now. But those seeds do grow, and we never know fully the impact that we've made. Right. And I think that's part of the issue with policing versus music. With music, when you write it, when you record it, and you perform it, you look out there, and sometimes you see people with their eyes closed, and you never know fully what their story is. But you know that song is impacting them in a positive way. That's how I feel, and I know that we're making a positive impact and a difference. We don't necessarily fully know. With policing, again, it goes back to, a lot of times I'm dealing with youth that are voicing their issues in their life. A common thing I hear is, I just don't feel heard. and what an opportunity we have to be in that moment in that youth's lives, whether it's they're in foster care, have a positive mentor in their life. Well, what do you do? Well, you sit there and you listen. You be that person who listens. And so many times those conversations lead to faith, right? And I know that's the impact. It's gonna make a huge difference. And you never know if those people are gonna move on to be police officers, musicians, artists, leaders in their community. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do, and I'm going to continue doing that, but I don't fully know the impact that it's made yet.
What are some of the challenges young people are facing today? I know you work with young people. You have a foundation that is focused on helping the youth. And how can communities better support them? You did talk a little bit about giving them a voice, giving them more opportunities. So please share.
This is an interesting one because we need to be better listeners and not necessarily talkers. A lot of times youth just need somebody to listen to them, and that's where schools really are such an important part for youth. Sometimes kids are going from mayhem at home and going to school just to find normalcy, right? They have teachers there that are listening to them. And we're very fortunate in our band to have David Peterson. He's actually the songwriter of Even If, and he's actually an Edmonton City police officer, school resource officer, and he's such an amazing man. And he's one of those people, he has such great relationship with the youth and listens. That's really, I understand that families go through tough times and families break up and there's addictions involved, and it leads to, kids ending up in foster care and all that stuff. But I do think that there needs to be better resources for youth within community. And it's a tough thing, especially in 2026, when there's a lot of uncertainty, economically, politically, and financially in some of these programs. But what I can say for me is, if I go into these communities working on my day job, drop into those foster homes and just talk to the youth and see how they're doing, right? It's little things like that that really inspire and motivate. And I think the same thing goes for everybody else in these communities. If you know of a young person who, maybe get involved in like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, those kind of programs that really support youth and have empathy, and compassion and a giving heart. I think that's really how we can make this world a better place and start the conversation for sure.
What was your latest reaction from a youth who you last talked to and listened to?
I had 3 in the last month, and they were all great. So there was this young man who we were having a problem with. We were called to his foster home. And so we show up, the social workers are there, he's there. And this is an individual who's known to not necessarily be the most cooperative with police. But I always find when you go, I've never met this young man before. You go in, you go shake his hand, right? You bring yourself down to that level. You're not up here. And that's a great way to start the conversation. And you sit there, and I just sit down next to him, not over top, and listen to him. Hey, what's going on? What are your goals, your dreams in life, all that stuff? I asked that of all the kids, and a lot of times you don't get an answer. And I looked over to the right, and I seen this little keyboard sitting there, and I said, let me hear you play a song. And he didn't play a song at that time, but I noticed there was a sustain pedal not with the keyboard. He didn't have one for the keyboard, so I jumped on the keyboard, started playing it in this foster home. And I used that as a way to break the ice with this youth, because this was a language we both could understand. He obviously had a passion for music. I had a passion for music. And we were able to get rid of the silence in the elevator, lack of better terms, and open a new conversation with his passions and start to have the conversation about goals and dreams in his life. And I said, I actually bought a keyboard a couple of years back, and I actually got a different sustain pedal for it. I never used the original sustain pedal for the keyboard. I said, I think I got it in a box somewhere at the house. I'll find it. I'm back here in this community tomorrow. I'm going to come by and see you. And the biggest thing about that was I don't think he thought I was going to come back. Because how many times do
Hmm.
kids in these situations have false promises made with just letdowns? So it was a very important thing to say, you know what, this cannot be missed. This has to happen. Even if I couldn't find that sustain pedal, I was going to go buy him a sustain pedal because it was that important. Sure enough, roll up. He was so surprised that we came back with a sustain pedal for his keyboard, plugged it in, played it, showed him the differences and how it can sound and hold the notes. And he got on that keyboard and played. That is the start of building a relationship with trust with that youth. And that is something that was meaningful for him. And I seen a smile on his face.
Hmm.
It was more than just a piano. It was
Hmm.
somebody following through with a promise that he's probably never ever really had. So that's just one of the examples. I love it.
That's a wonderful example, Sterling. And it also tells him that he is valued and what he has to say is valued.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. What projects, music, or community initiatives are you most excited about right now? And maybe it's something you're working on, or maybe it's
Oh,
something
yeah.
that you are wanting to work on.
Yeah, we got lots of inspiration roll, and we are the music industry is at it's on a road that nobody really knows where it's going right now. We have AI that's happening that's really changing the landscape of music. There's a lot of things. We have a project that's been on my mind for several months. Actually, it's been a lot longer than that, but it was just written recently. And I've had experience within working within government and, understanding how people climb the corporate ladders, the glass ceiling. And sometimes people aren't meant to do that, and they're meant to be leaders on their own without having to go with the flow with everybody else. And I'm one of those guys. I used to want to promote within policing to make a difference. And it's interesting because I have lots of friends who have made it to high levels. And it's funny because they thought they could make a difference and they realized they actually couldn't when the bigger machine is there and they're just a link in that machine. And it goes back to Jim Carrey's speech at one of the Grammys, how he went up there and everyone was laughing and they were talking about, he was saying, if I, something along the lines of second Grammy and, I thought that this would be enough and it wasn't. And when you get 3 Grammys, it will never be enough. And the thing is, we don't have to necessarily win awards and Grammys and promote the corporate ladder to be successful in life. We have to make our own path and be where we're supposed to be. So our next song is called I Ain't No Yes Man. And we're going to record that on June 27th in the Calgary studio. And it talks about being a voice, being vocal and not necessarily popular, but standing up for what's right. And I'm known for that. I'm certainly not somebody who just agrees. I will speak my mind. And I think that actually can prevent you from promoting in certain areas, but it's what's right. And that's what we need to be in our communities. We need to be respectful, but we need to have integrity. We have to have honesty, professionalism, compassion, accountability, and respect. And that's the way I roll. And that's what our next song is about. So I Ain't No Yes Man. It's going to be coming out in the next few months.
Great. I'm excited to hear it. I have your song, Even If, on my radio station, Global Gospel Worship Radio. It's on my regular music rotation. Don't be surprised that someday you will be even a bigger leadership position in your community. God is really preparing you. He's really preparing you for whatever's to come. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I don't claim to be a prophet. I know that the youth is in your heart, and I want to end it with this. What message would you like to leave the Indigenous youth who may be listening today, and not just for the Indigenous youth, but also for the youth today?
Never give up. Never give up. And, there's going to be naysayers in our life that want to rain on a parade and don't necessarily want to see certain people become successful. They're going to have peers that want to tear them down. because they don't want to see them achieve their goals and their dreams. Don't listen to those people, and don't do things just to prove other people wrong. Do it for yourself. And we all have a path in our life. God already knows our path in life, and myself included. I don't know where my path is going to be in the future. Who knows? But I'm going to continue down this road. And you just have to, if you have goals and your dreams in your life, you have to just focus on one thing at a time, and pick away at it. And for the people that are listening that are in positions of mentorship for youth, give youth an opportunity. It's very important. So that's my message for our youth.
My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and
Thank you for listening to Global Gospel Worship Radio with Marina Maria, where all the nations praise the Lord with Christian international music and radio programs. We'd like to thank our major financial sponsors, Spectrum Insurance and Financial Group, for supporting our program, as well as our other media partners who make the broadcast of this show possible. If you'd like to donate to our radio ministry or to learn more about it, please go to globalgospelworshipradio.org. And finally, we hope you'll go with this blessing from Psalm 29:11. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. Thanks for listening.